July 16, 1918, Yekaterinburg, Russia. 11 people were shaken awake at 2 in the morning inside a windowless basement and told to get dressed. They were informed it was a security precaution, a routine procedure. They had no idea it would be the last night of their lives. Among them was a 17-year-old girl named Anastasia Romanov, the youngest daughter of Tsar Nicholas II, the man who once commanded the most powerful empire in Europe. 20 minutes later, the basement fell completely silent. But then a rumor began spreading across the world. Anastasia had escaped. The young girl had survived, and for nearly a full century, that legend grew so powerful that Hollywood turned it into a blockbuster film. Millions of people believed it with absolute certainty, and more than 30 different women stepped forward, claiming to be the real Princess Anastasia. So, what actually happened? Before I reveal what geneticists finally uncovered after 100 years of searching, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment right now and tell me, do you think Anastasia survived? Type yes if you once believed the legend. Type no if you always thought it was a fabricated story. I will pin the most liked comment and respond to it personally. Here is what most people do not realize about the Romanov case. This was not just a family tragedy buried somewhere in the distant pages of Russian history. The murder of the Romanov family was one of the most consequential political cover-ups of the entire 20th century, and the mystery surrounding it was not accidental. It was engineered. For decades, 3 competing theories dominated the conversation. The first theory claimed that one or more family members had survived the execution and escaped through underground networks. The second theory pointed to a deliberate Soviet cover-up, suggesting the Bolshevik government had intentionally scattered and concealed the remains to prevent the family from becoming martyrs. The third theory was darker and far more unsettling. It suggested the bodies had been destroyed so completely that the truth could never be recovered. And into that vacuum of uncertainty walked more than 30 women across the 20th century, each one claiming to be the missing princess. The most notorious of all was a woman known as Anna Anderson, who maintained her false identity for 38 years, from 1920 to 1984, captivating journalists, aristocrats, and the general public alike. But history, as it always does, had other plans. Because science does not forget. Science does not fabricate, and science, given enough time, always finds its way back to the truth. To understand why this mystery lasted as long as it did, you need to understand exactly what happened on that night in 1918. Tsar Nicholas II ruled over the Russian Empire with his wife Alexandra and their 5 children. Olga was 22, Tatiana was 21, Maria was 19, Anastasia was 17, and their only son, the 12-year-old Alexei, suffered from hemophilia, a condition where the blood cannot clot properly, meaning even a minor injury could be fatal. When the Bolshevik Revolution swept Russia in 1917, the entire family was placed under house arrest and eventually transferred to a fortified mansion in Yekaterinburg, known as the House of Special Purpose. On the night of July 16, 1918, Bolshevik forces led by Yakov Yurovsky brought the family and 4 servants into the basement and opened fire. In 1991, Soviet authorities finally admitted what had been hidden for over 70 years. 9 skeletal remains were discovered in a mass grave in the Koptyaki forest, roughly 12 miles outside Yekaterinburg. But here was the problem that kept the legend alive for another 2 decades. 2 bodies were missing, a young male and one of the daughters, and nobody could say for certain which daughter had vanished from the grave. When Russian and international forensic teams began examining the 9 recovered remains in the early 1990s, they used every available scientific tool at the time. Dental records were cross-referenced with surviving photographs and medical histories. Skeletal measurements were compared against known descriptions of the family members. Isotope analysis, specifically strontium isotope ratios embedded in bone tissue, confirmed that the individuals had lived in the Ural region of Russia for the majority of their lives. The forensic evidence was already pointing in one direction. But the most important finding was not what they discovered inside the grave. It was what they found when they looked at Anna Anderson. In 1994, 3 years after the first remains were recovered, scientists obtained a preserved tissue sample from a surgery Anderson had undergone in 1979. Using mitochondrial DNA analysis, researchers compared her genetic profile against known living relatives of the Romanov family. The result was absolute. Anna Anderson shared zero genetic connection to the Romanov bloodline. 38 years of one of the most elaborate identity fraud cases in modern history had been dismantled by a single laboratory test. But the bigger question still remained. Who were the two missing bodies? And did that absence mean someone had actually survived? In 2007, a second burial site was discovered, approximately 70 meters from the original grave in the Koptyaki forest. 2 additional sets of remains were found, partially burned and deliberately fragmented, consistent with a hasty and violent attempt at concealment. This was the breakthrough that changed everything. In 2009, a joint research team from the University of Massachusetts and the Russian Federal Bureau of Investigation published their findings in the peer-reviewed journal PLOS ONE. Their methodology was extraordinarily rigorous. They compared mitochondrial DNA from the newly recovered remains against 2 living relatives. The first was Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, the husband of Queen Elizabeth II, who shared a direct maternal bloodline with Empress Alexandra. The second comparison used the chromosomal DNA of living descendants connected to Tsar Nicholas II through the paternal line. Both comparisons produced a match at a confidence level of 99.9%. And in 2015, a final comprehensive analysis confirmed the identities of both missing individuals with complete scientific certainty. The young male was Alexei. The female was Maria, not Anastasia, as many had long speculated. All 11 people who entered that basement on July 16, 1918, had been accounted for. Every single one of them had died that night. The legend of the surviving princess was over. Now, here is the question that I think deserves more attention than it typically gets. If the forensic evidence was already strong by the mid-1990s, and if Anna Anderson was conclusively debunked in 1994, why did the legend of Anastasia continue to capture the public imagination for decades afterward? The answer is not really about evidence at all. It is about psychology. Human beings have a deeply wired need to believe in survival, especially when the victims are young, innocent, and powerless. Anastasia was not just a princess. She was a teenager. She was a daughter. And the idea that she might have escaped gave people something that raw historical tragedy almost never offers: hope. The Soviet government understood this mechanism perfectly. By deliberately concealing the burial site for over 70 years, they did not just hide bodies. They manufactured a mystery. They created the exact conditions under which a legend could grow unchallenged. The Romanov case is not simply a story about one family or one revolution. It is a story about what happens when political power deliberately weaponizes uncertainty. And it is a story about the long, slow, patient work of science pushing back against that darkness. In 1998, 80 years after the execution, the remains of 9 family members were given a formal state burial at the Cathedral of Saints Peter and Paul in St. Petersburg, finally returning their dignity to them after 8 decades of concealment. In 2015, when the final DNA results were published and confirmed, the case was officially closed. 100 years, 2 burial sites, 3 generations of forensic scientists, and a confidence level of 99.9%. The Romanov family did not disappear. They were never truly lost. We simply spent 100 years looking for a survivor when the science was always pointing us toward a different and far more important truth. Sometimes the most radical act is not finding who escaped. It is finally being willing to face who did not. If this story made you think differently about how legends are born and how science dismantles them, hit the like button and subscribe so you never miss the next investigation. And leave me a comment below. Which historical mystery do you want us to solve next?